Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. What would you say to a person like John, who has no arms and no legs? What would you say to a person like Muhammad, who's not able to hear? Or what would you say to a person like Husna, who suddenly lost her 22-year-old son in a plane crash? I have met all of these people in my life, and if they were to ask me if everything would be fine with them soon, I don't know what I could say to them. It's not like one morning, if John wakes up, he'll find a pair of limbs. It's not like one morning, Muhammad will start to hear, or one morning, Husna's son Hussain will come back to life to embrace his mother. How then can I tell them to have hope? How then can I tell them to have faith when they've gone through so much more than most of us here? How can I tell them to be positive then? Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, whether they have hope or not, their circumstance will not change. And it is the same for me. Whether I have hope or not, I know that my sight will never come back. And today, I would like to share glimpses of my life with you and leave it to your judgment to see whether what happened was fair or not. So I was born on January 21st, 1991, to an Indian mother and Pakistani father, two enemy countries. And if that was not enough, I was born with an eye condition called congenital glaucoma. Now, my parents were taken by surprise with this because I was the first child and no one else in my family had any history of eye disease. They tried to seek answers from doctors, but unfortunately, to no avail. They weren't sure what to do, but they thanked God for His blessings and took me home. I don't know what they went through with all the uncertainty about what was wrong with me and what would happen to me as I grew up. And of course, as a child, I couldn't communicate with them, just like neither of you could, because I couldn't talk. But as I was growing up, they did realize a few things. So when I'd play with toys that fell far from me, I found it a bit difficult to find them. And on a day when most children are very happy receiving gifts on their first birthday, I showed the exact opposite emotion by crying all the time, especially when light was shone in my face. Now, they did not know what was wrong, but we later discovered that I suffered from extreme photophobia, which meant that I could not face light. My eyes would often water uncontrollably, and I would often have eye pains. Ask any glaucoma patient about pressure pains, and they will tell you they can be one of the most debilitating and grueling pains that you can have. All of that came to an end in 2014, but I'll come back to that in a bit. So coming back to my childhood, of course, my parents wanted the best for me, just like every parent wants for their child. And my mom was very determined that I go to a regular school with sighted girls and boys, because the transition to university would be a lot easier. She went around from school to school with no school willing to accept me, except one that said, "We will give him admission under the condition that you teach accounting there." And she sacrificed her career and agreed. And there, I started my school journey. Now, I was the only visually impaired student in that school, and of course was quite different from the rest, as I could not see the blackboard, run around without banging my head anywhere, or write normally. Now, as a child, I don't have many memories of what those initial days were like, and all my recollections are based on what I've heard from my parents. Now, I don't know how they coped with that situation, seeing my eye condition worsen and my grades in school drop. I had in total about 15 surgeries or so, but none of those brought any good results. My eyesight gradually deteriorated, and at the age of 7, when I was in grade 2, my world plunged into darkness forever. Now, I don't know how my parents felt at that time, but I'm sure it was probably one of the most devastating things that ate away their happiness and their soul. And to add to that, the school said that I could not continue there anymore, as I couldn't see at all. Now, my mom failed to give up and tried everything in her power, frantically running around, trying to find things that would help me cope at school, and requested the school just to give me one more chance, which they luckily did. She even learned Braille so she could teach me that, and taught me typing at a very early age. She still recollects how my little fingers would type on that big keyboard. After that, however, luckily, things started to improve as teachers realized that I could learn just like everyone else, as long as some adaptations were made, and the fact that the loss of sight is not the same as the loss of mind. So things, luckily, started to improve. Now, in grade 6, for one of my courses, my mom was my teacher, which was not very nice because I got punished more than any other child in the class. I know I was naughty, but I think the punishments were always disproportionate. And to make everything worse, because my mom was a teacher in the same school, she often heard my complaints in the teacher staff room. Now, I was part of the naughty gang at school. So when our headmistress would peep through the windows on her regular rounds, everyone else would shut up because they'd see her, but I wouldn't. And then I'd get into trouble for that, of course. So moving on, we tried to find ways to help me cope, but then the challenge came for my O-levels when I had to decide between science and commerce. And there were many people that told me, listen, dude, science is not the thing for you. Yes, you like it, but whether you can do it or not, we don't know. But even at that age, I was quite determined, and I was like, I know it might be difficult for me, but I would rather do that for the rest of my life than something that I could be good at, but did not enjoy. I luckily got the grades at school to pursue science for my O-levels and took my GCSEs in 9 subjects, and then went on to do my A-levels in 5 subjects, most of which were science subjects. Now, the added challenge there was that the CIE, which is the Cambridge International Examination, wasn't willing to exempt me from practicals in the laboratory. So they provided me an assistant who would do as I say and tell me the results accordingly. So I finished my A-levels, and then came another obstacle, university. 13 out of the 16 universities that I applied to rejected me outright. And for the other 3, for lots of reasons, those weren't feasible. So I was left without a university to go to. Now, that same year, when I finished my A-levels, my family moved to Saudi Arabia, and I decided not to take a gap year and to pursue my education in a local university. So I applied to Al Faisal University, which was one of the newly started good universities there, for engineering. Now, I got a text message from the university inviting me for the orientation ceremony for new students. So my family and I, we booked our train tickets to go from Dammam to Riyadh. That's about a 5-hour train journey. But before we could get on the train, they called me up to say that they had sent that message by mistake, and apparently I had not been granted admission. But I assume you would have probably learned by now my family is very stubborn. So we decided, no, we have the tickets, let's go for it. And we did. So I attended the orientation, still very anxious about whether they will accept me or not, and requested that we be allowed to meet with the dean. After some persuasion, we were allowed in the afternoon to meet with him, and he took a test there and then, and I think I did fairly well. He sounded fairly impressed and told us to go away while he consulted with the other people before coming back to us. Now those days obviously felt like weeks and months and years as I waited, but luckily the following week they did allow me to start my engineering degree there, which was a great, great moment of relief. Now, of course, when I left Dammam to go to Riyadh, away from my family, I left with a very heavy heart, with feelings of happiness, but also sorrow and anxiety, because I'd never lived on my own before, and moving to a new place where I don't speak the language felt really, really daunting. But besides the emotional aspect, there were so many other things that I had to contend with as part of my industrial engineering degree, such as complicated diagrams, mathematical equations, computer programs, laboratory experiments, and those lazy students who wouldn't want to work with me on a project. I will not bore you with all the details, but what I had learned by that time was that if I persisted, I knew that I could do it. So I kept persevering, and then came the last few weeks of university before graduation, where I eagerly waited to hear about who the university chose as a valedictorian that year. I jumped on my feet when I found out that I had been chosen as the student representative, as I had the highest grade on my batch that year. And that day really proved to me that disability is not the same as inability. When I was writing my speech, I think my mind went back to those days when I was not even given admission, when they did not even feel that I could do anything as complicated as industrial engineering. But here I was, preparing for that speech. And I did not tell my parents about it, because I wanted that to be a surprise for them. So when they took the train again, this time knowing that, yes, they were welcome there, they sat in the hall, and that's when they found out that I was the speaker there. And of course, I was on stage. I don't know how they felt, but I think all of us can imagine the pride that they would have felt at that point, when they would have taken their mind back to all those years ago, when they had to deal with so much, but all of that was now bearing fruits. And that is one day that I will never forget in my life. After that, I was offered a job by an engineering company where I worked for 2 years before coming to UCL and the UK last year in 2015 to pursue a master's in systems engineering. Now, of course, that degree also involved lots of diagrams, lots of complicated concepts, and so on. And to add injury to my wounds, I decided to do my dissertation in system dynamic modeling, which is a very visually intensive field. I don't know why I did that, but that is history now. But my supervisor came to my aid at that time and introduced me to a program that I was able to use, in which I could upload my data using spreadsheets in text. However, I still had to imagine all those variables and all those links that I was using to create my model. But it all worked out at the end. Thank you. But it all worked out at the end. Now, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, I did not tell you these incidences from my life to put you off to sleep or to brag about myself in any way. I was trying to convey a point, and I hope that you received it. In the beginning of my speech, I talked about John, Muhammad, and Husna. Now, whether they have hope or not, nothing will change for them, and it is the same for me. Because even if there is a cure in the future for glaucoma, I cannot benefit from it, because 2 years ago, in 2014, I had a surgery in which my eyes were removed and my optic nerve was cut. So what you can see now is a plastic prosthetic in front of a silicone implant that fills the vacuum that my eyes left. Now, this surgery took away the photophobia, the pain, but also the possibility of making use of that cure if it happens. Now, you may ask me, why be hopeful then? Do you despair? Yes. Do you feel sad at times? Of course, everyone does. But the difference between people who have hope and those who don't is that the former lead a more fulfilling life. Now, John will never get his arms and legs again. But if you see the smile on his face when he rides his custom-made recumbent bike to prove to the world that disability is only a state of mind, when you see Muhammad communicating with the world with his beautiful sign language and not allowing anyone to pity him, or when you see Husna smile in the hope that her son's death still gives inspiration to many people in the Air Force because he died on duty as a test pilot. And even for me, even though I've lost my sight, Allah has allowed me to see through my vision. And one of the most beautiful verses that I find in the Holy Quran is in chapter 22, verse 46, which talks about blindness not being in the eyes, but actually in the heart. And after all, after these 1400 years, we still remember the message of Imam al-Hussain, because at that time, he knew that he had to do something to fight oppression, and he had hope that him and his family could save the religion that his grandfather had brought to the world. Otherwise, we would either not have Islam or have a mutilated version of it, which would be far from what the Prophet had taught us. Now, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, I don't have a lot of time to talk to you about hope. And if you forget everything that I've said today, I will be happy if you just remember one thing: that life is a beautiful gift given to us by God. This world is a testing ground, and believe me, trials and tribulations will always be there. But remember, every morning when you wake up, you have a choice between hope and despair. You have a choice between gratitude and ingratitude. You have a choice between loving or hating yourself. And if you wake up every morning with hope, with gratitude, and with love, believe me, no one in this world can ever shake your faith, optimism, or resolve. And I would like to end with a short story. Can I please request all of you to close your eyes so you can live the story with me? So there was a man who would really enjoy taking walks on the beach. Every night he would go there and he'd be the only one. He had a lot of faith in God, and when he would be walking, he'd always see two pairs of footprints. He knew that the first was his and the second were of God. And he felt very comforted and very pleased that God was always with him. But one fine day, he had an accident that turned his life upside down, and obviously he was sad. But he decided to go to the beach nevertheless. Let's see what God does to me today. So he goes to the beach, starts walking, but soon realizes that there's not two, but only one set of footprints. And that turns his pain into anguish. Why, God? When I was happy, you were always by my side. But now that I really need you, you've forsaken me. And then came a voice with the most beautiful message. Every day when you would walk, I'd walk beside you. But now that you need me the most, the footprints that you see are mine, because I am carrying you today. And my message to everyone today would be that God never forsakes anyone who sincerely invokes him. Believe me, if you are hopeful, you can be a miracle to yourself or a miracle in someone else's life. Thank you.